in the major media in the United States especially, but I guess throughout the world, there seems to be a concerted effort to basically brainwash the population or keep them focused on trivial issues that are not of the real essential importance to the masses. In other words, you can see this done a lot of times with Hollywood and stuff, and I want to keep this brief because I like putting out more videos on health things that can actually possibly help people than this type of stuff. But I see that there's not just a major problem at the major media, but there's also a major problem with the alternative media, even though they're probably the only voice that you actually have, or the voices that you only have that you actually have that could give you a different viewpoint than the major media, because people are actually starved for real information and they're not getting it. Now, what I have to state though is if people just calm down a lot of times and just concentrate on the real functional things that you need and will benefit you, you will actually benefit far greatly than pursuing giddy rumors left and right, which seems to be, unfortunately, it's very popular on YouTube, and I'm just not going to play that type of game. But our collective consciousness, if you want to call it that, to put a phrase, I know sometimes it's a little bit of the huggy-feely type thing. Sometimes people might think, what do you really mean by that? But our collective efforts and willpower in a constructive way can basically conquer anything. But most people just don't get off their dead asses. But a lot of times there's a business involved in waking up people by fear. And they never get past the fear state to the actual constructive state of doing something, because we actually have all the tools in the world in the United States of America to fix anything almost overnight, and we can actually influence the entire globe. You know, the United States was always looked up across the entire globe as, you know, the pinnacle of freedom and everything, and now things are starting to change a little bit. Some of the public perception is changing throughout the world, but that may be by design of the New World Order, even though the United States has not changed that much. That perception is probably being designed on purpose so Americans reject their way of life, their real system that they have that they don't use enough, and also to turn public opinion against the United States and the world. And, you know, I don't want to pick on this particular person per se, because I can think of dozens of them, you know, Jesse Ventura, Ben Fulford, David Wilcock, David Icke, you know, all these people. They're telling you some truth, but they're not really getting to, well, let's roll up our sleeves and do this and fix it. But it's more a matter of, I'm in business of keeping people's seats on the edge of the chair. So what's going to happen next? It's almost like a giddy soap opera that where you're not actually doing something constructive. You know, it's like looking at a problem and you're just talking yourself, oh, the problem's worse, it's worse. It's the business of fear. Now, I personally think that a lot of the alternative media is really controlled by the big powers that be, and it's a game. And I don't want to just pick on AJ over here because he's one of them. He's one of them, but there's a whole host of them. And pretty much everybody else on the YouTube airwaves, whatever, follows these guys left and right. And I'm like, you know, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'm not going to put out that type of stuff. I think I put out like one video like that or two, and they take off like crazy because it's like people need to ignore those type of videos. I'm never putting them out again, but they need to ignore those type of videos because they're not constructive. They're not constructive. And actually, at the end of this video, I'm going to actually show you something that's you're going to find it very unpopular because, well, first off, let me get to something here. You know, this is an example, I guess, from history. You know, the Spartan 300, right? How many Americans would be like that today? I don't know. I don't know if there'd be that many. Maybe it doesn't require to be that many, because actually during the Revolutionary War, there was only 3% that were really involved. Most of them were just loyalists and keeping the same. They wanted to keep the status quo going. The three percenters, actually there were three percenters, not one percenters. I guess the Spartans would have been 1 basis points or whatever. But they kept the enemies at bay. But it's not all about, especially not all about direct frontal assault. It has a lot to do with shrewdness and keeping your cool. And there may be a method to other ways that people do not see on the surface. The Spartan way would be direct frontal assault. You might not want to do it that way. And one group I actually have a lot of respect for in their methods is the Mossad, the Israeli Mossad. Now I know there's going to be a lot of people they're going to go, the Israeli. I'm going to tell you this right now. The Israelis in Israel and Jews are still, there's things they do that aren't perfect. I know that. There's humans, everybody's human, right? There's no such thing as a perfect human being of any group or whatever you have, or society or country. Now, I do know, though, that the New World Order is directing a lot of focus on Jews in Israel as the entire problem in the world, and that is flat out deliberate misdirection. But let me just point to you this way. If you agree or disagree with this statement, you have to remember that some of the methods of the Mossad, whereas deception is the key and is the way you want to be. In other words, back during the time of Rome, when the greatest Roman army ever fielded in their history, up until that point, in the centuries that there were, they had bigger armies after this, but it was at the field of Cana, when they went against Hannibal. What happened was that army actually was defeated, and defeated in a matter of a few hours. It wasn't like the Battle of 300, where the 300 went against all the Persians and the Immortals, and they withstood them for days. Actually, Hannibal, within a few hours, destroyed this entire Roman army, who was well trained. The Roman army was well trained, but it was a double envelopment tactics. It was tactics that destroyed them. But they still did not give up. But what they had to do was develop the Fabian approach, where it wasn't direct frontal assault, because the Roman army that could be fielded after the major army was destroyed was much smaller than Hannibal, and they're still dealing with a formidable enemy that was much greater than them. And this has actually been the case where Israel and Jews had to survive over the centuries, because they were always the little guy. They always were the little guy. Sometimes they're really the strong guy. I don't know, maybe they're a strong guy in some areas of business or whatever, but by and large, they aren't, for the most part, over the centuries. But that is the type of strategy you have to adopt, because if you're actually somebody that is a real person dedicated to, the Constitution and Bill of Rights for all individuals in the United States, as inalienable rights that everybody has by God, but are protected by the Bill of Rights, well, you're going to have to be more than direct frontal assault. You're going to have to be shrewd. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of Jewish people are very, very, very much on the side of the Bill of Rights, despite, a couple of liberal. I just have to address this, because there's so much is junk on the internet where there's a big Jewish conspiracy beneath every rock. Fear is not going to get you anywhere. You got to actually roll up your sleeves and do something about it. But at the same time, you want to be shrewd. You want to be very, very shrewd. Because the one thing, the world is actually owned by us, humanity. It's not owned by the elite. It's not owned by them. We don't need them. They trick us into giving up our powers so they take it. It's like they suck the life out of you. That's what they're about. And, well, I don't want to be too lengthy on this thing, but I swear there's just a lot of giddy rumors out there floating around and fear-mongering on the internet. And I am, kind of disgusted with it to the max. I've been disgusted with it. But just be your own self, and you will triumph. And if you lose, you still triumph, because you were in the game and you attempted as best you possibly can to fight the powers that be. That's just the way it is. You definitely, that's not necessarily a loss. It's like you lost when you don't try. And, just being worried about something and involved in giddy rumors left and right, and, what's going to happen tomorrow, and, oh, this date is going to do this, and the Illuminati are up to that. Who gives a shit what they're up to tell you the truth? It's like you see what the problem is, you work to address it, and you work in constructive ways. And constructive ways means you roll up your sleeves and you do something, and you actually are very shrewd about how you go about it. So I just wanted to put this out here because it's not one of those videos that's going to scare the hell out of people and like everybody's going to go, oh, what's going to happen? But just keep your head on straight with all this fear mongering, because I am like totally sick of it to the max. And these drama freaks, they turn my stomach. So you got to be more like shrewd. You got to remember, it's us against the big powers. It's almost like you're an Israelite against the Goliaths. You're going to have to be shrewd. You're going to have to be tough. And that's all there is to it. So just keep the faith and the hell with the fear. That's all I got to say.